Connor, having parked his car near the shopping center, stepped out into the tranquil early August evening. Glancing out the window, he felt a slight melancholy, as the day was already leaning towards dusk, but had not fully merged with the darkness yet. Summer evenings, though growing darker, offered a pleasant coolness, as if the freshness of the twilight air was barely perceptible. The challenging day at work, filled with monthly reviews and the development of a new project, had left its mark on Connor's tired face. Yet, this multitasking routine was akin to an engaging game for him, where constant questions were seen as part of an exhilarating challenge. Furthermore, a reassuring thought of an addition to his already high salary echoed in his mind, providing strength and motivation. Work matters distracted him from somber thoughts, preventing Connor from delving into the long-gone past. Leaving the car at a leisurely pace, he relished the coolness of the interior. The street had been saturated with unbearable heat for several weeks, and people eagerly awaited the approach of autumn. Peering out the window once more, Connor noticed 3 passers-by, 2 middle-aged men and a slender teenager. The boy was engaged in lively conversation with his father, gesturing energetically and smiling from time to time. His light, almost springy gait and sun-kissed skin gave him an expressive appearance. Upon seeing a boy of this nature, Connor, unnoticed by those around him, immersed himself in thoughts of his own son. This summer, his son would have turned 14. He envisioned him with a passport, perhaps interested in programming or sports, and felt that he had missed the chance to meet his son due to his own disarray. He tried to justify himself and struggled with a sense of guilt, yearning for the lost prospect of being with his son, Claire, attempting to discover even a glimpse of him in others, but finding no success. Connor was a completely different person before meeting Claire, youthful, selfish, and perhaps even irresponsible. Shame enveloped him when recalling his past behavior. At that moment, he realized that thoughts and memories inevitably accompanied him, sometimes feeling that he would never be able to rid himself of this guilt, believing he deserved a heavy fate. Connor's birth and upbringing occurred in abundance within a well-off family. His father held a successful position in business, while his mother was the chief accountant at a large factory. They had at their disposal a spacious and magnificent house, expensive toys, stylish clothing, and the opportunity for frequent travels. Connor lacked nothing. His parents, grandparents from both sides of the family showered him with attention and material pleasures. However, at an early age, the boy felt a sort of rivalry among them for his affection, and he began to exploit this, playing on the emotions of his older relatives and manipulating them to achieve his desired goals. Connor attended a prestigious high school where he was always surrounded by a large circle of friends. It was a strong and cheerful company, mainly consisting of children from affluent families where teenagers had access to everything: cafes, attractions, entertainment centers, and later, expensive clubs and bar gatherings. Connor's life flourished in the bright colors of carefreeness. Upon entering the local university, he firmly declined an offer to study in another city, despite his father's persuasions, who saw huge prospects and opportunities for him at Moscow State University. Nevertheless, Connor preferred to stay, understanding that here in his homeland, he already had everything he needed for his ambitions. Under the influence of older friends, he knew exactly whom and how much to pay before exams to avoid studying and obtain a diploma, and he had no intention of changing his plans. So, the time had come. Connor became a student at the local university's economics faculty, marking the beginning of a true golden era in his life. Having moved out from his parents' home, Connor received gifts from both sides of the family to celebrate finishing school. From his father, he got an apartment in the city center, gifted by his grandparents, and from his mother, keys to an expensive foreign car. These generous gifts not only made the young man happy, but also independent. A bright, eventful life full of friends, entertainment, and delightful girls lay before him. In such a rhythm, he simply didn't have time for studies. Hardly ever visiting the university, Connor only dropped by before exams to settle matters with the professors. He was ashamed of his previous attitude toward girls in his student years. He saw them more as beautiful things, intended for him and others like him. Disregarding their feelings and aspirations, he chose his companions solely based on their appearance. In his youth, Connor preferred girls with model-like appearances, always with large eyes and relaxed smiles gracing their faces. Flaws in their looks didn't catch his attention because, in his view, an attractive and affluent young man couldn't be seen with girls who didn't meet beauty standards. They themselves approached him, interested and smiling, in clubs, cafes, and sometimes even waited for him at the university entrance, seeking his attention. In such an atmosphere, Connor felt wanted and valuable, confident that he could get whatever he desired. However, sometimes he grew weary of carefree, superficial relationships and preferred more complex challenges. He chose the girls he emphasized, aiming to conquer them. It was reminiscent of a hunter and prey game. Some ladies pretended to be unattainable, but Connor was adept at deciphering their game. And so, a game began where Connor invested all his efforts to use his charm to break resistance. He enjoyed feeling like a gallant cavalier, creating an illusion akin to a beautiful fairy tale. He showered them with enormous bouquets of roses, cute plush toys, exquisite jewelry. At times he made bold and reckless gestures like singing love songs with a rock band beneath the window of a charming girl. Connor enjoyed inventing something new, surprising, eliciting delight and admiration. And so, the coldest and most enigmatic Snow Queen melted in Connor's embrace as the game drew to a close. The young man's interest waned quickly. What had recently seemed so mysterious and appealing suddenly became dull and indifferent. Connor distanced himself, overwhelmed by a sense of longing, unable to endure the dullness that began creeping into his everyday life. Ending things with yet another chosen one required effort on his part. It had long ceased to bring pleasure and joy, as it did at the beginning of relationships, but something had to be done. Connor couldn't stand women's tears, avoided lengthy conversations and pleas. All of this suppressed him and made him feel insignificant. Therefore, he chose the tactic of blame. He always found something to blame his partner for, one who was unwilling to accept the breakup. Everyone had their weaknesses, and perhaps it was all too harsh. It's not impossible that after such situations with Connor, the girls developed complexes and maybe even psychological traumas. One of his former lovers, Hannah, stood out especially after this incident. Connor became more cautious with her. Meeting her in a nightclub, she impressed him with her vivacity, beauty, and ease. Hannah passionately danced on the dance floor. Her long hair seemed even more attractive as it swayed to the music's rhythm. The girl clearly relished being the center of attention. Connor firmly decided to embark on a search for new, more thrilling adventures. Images of the ideal companion for the evening flickered in his mind. A young, attractive figure dressed in a daring mini-skirt and high platform sandals. Thus appeared Hannah before him, a girl with a notably expressive style that, in Connor's opinion, promised an extraordinary evening. Before taking the first step, he decided to devote time to observations, watching Hannah, immersing himself in her movements and mannerisms. Hannah, looking alluring, remained on the dance floor, leisurely enjoying the club's atmosphere and the pounding music. Connor was captivated by this spectacle, her freedom, naturalness, and confidence. His smile caught her gaze, causing the girl to freeze for a moment. Hannah's eyes, filled with an ocean of blue, captured Connor's attention like a powerful magnet, disappearing momentarily only to meet his gaze again. Connor couldn't help but admire every feature of the girl's face, which had drawn his attention from the very beginning. Up close, he noticed even more attractiveness: distinct facial features, cheek contours, delicate lips, and those boundless eyes that seemed endless. Without a single word, Hannah suddenly moved closer to Connor, as if deciding to break the established silence. The young man felt the hypnotic movements of the girl, making him forget everything, anticipating and feeling what would happen next. The beauty took the initiative, disrupting the ordinary script, making all events even more captivating and extraordinary. Hannah looked at Connor with such intensity that he didn't expect her to kiss him. In surprise, he embraced her, and she responded without pushing away. Their dance became mutual, and Connor felt himself drawn to this peculiar girl, her fiery eyes filling his feelings with a kind of madness. He had never had such girls before, and she clearly stood out among others. After getting acquainted and learning about each other, Hannah instantly pulled him by the hand to the balcony, where there was seclusion and silence. "I've never met anyone like you before," Connor confessed in admiration. "It's normal, there just aren't many like me," Hannah smiled in response. Hannah rented a room in the city after moving from her village of birth, enrolling in a law school. However, studying was not her passion, although she had no shortage of abilities. She preferred entertainment, socializing, wild dancing until dawn in clubs, as well as genuine adventures, all of which did not fit the role of a diligent student. In her first year, Hannah fell in love with a young and charismatic history professor so deeply that she couldn't think of anything else but his gray eyes. She was always straightforward and preferred to pursue what she liked. Her feelings for the young teacher became evident to everyone, including the university authorities. This forced the professor to leave and Hannah was expelled from the university. However, she rarely attended lectures. Student life attracted her to entirely different aspects. Hannah refused to return to her native village. It seemed dull and stifling to her there, and since childhood, she had dreamt of escaping that stifling atmosphere. However, after being expelled from the student dormitory, provided exclusively for students, she couldn't stay. As a result, Hannah had to work as a waitress in a bar. Hannah was unofficially hired at the bar. The bar needed attractive waitresses to uplift the mood of the customers, and they paid well for it. She earned enough to afford rent for a modest apartment, food, and inexpensive yet stylish clothing from local budget stores. This lifestyle suited Hannah perfectly. Working at the bar was pleasant, and the atmosphere was cozy. It was a large bar where a multitude of guests gathered every evening, and local rock musicians performed on stage, mainly rock bands and solo performers. Hannah liked this music. Here she felt at home. Certainly, attention was drawn to the young beauty by visitors, colleagues, and musicians alike. It was here in this bar that she met James, her first true love. He was the vocalist of a highly successful band. Soon, they began living together. James showed Hannah the world. They traveled to many cities because James' band actively toured. Later, as often happens, James found another muse. Hannah suffered for a long time after the breakup, but then decided that spending her youth on sorrow and pity wasn't worthwhile, especially when she gained another admirer. Consciously, she decided not to get involved in love anymore. Twice it hadn't brought her anything good. Now she simply enjoyed life, socializing, youth, freedom, finding pleasure in life without thinking about the future. Her uniqueness and a certain eccentricity greatly attracted Connor. He himself felt a lack of her lightness and abandon. Hannah could get behind the wheel after a bottle of champagne and speed past the traffic police post without fear. She fearlessly sat on the rooftops of tall buildings, dangling her long legs down, easily conversed with people, and sometimes even engaged in shoplifting not out of necessity but for the thrill. And this was just a small part of her unconventional behavior. Connor was never bored with her. He couldn't predict what to expect from the girl in the next moment, and that captivated him. Hannah composed poetry, skillfully played the guitar, joked wittily, and sang beautifully. She always drew attention to herself. She was a celebration personified, someone you'd never be bored with. And despite the promise not to fall in love anymore, she was head over heels for Connor. "You're special," Hannah often said, looking at Connor. "I feel good with you. You understand me, my soul. You're the best." Connor melted from these words and truly felt special. It always pleased Hannah to realize her attractiveness to men, regardless of where she appeared. However, only in front of one person, Connor, did she feel like a true beauty, attracting the attention of many. She had many acquaintances in her circle, and it seemed like she maintained friendly relations with the whole world. However, in reality, she had no close relationships with anyone except Connor. Hannah avoided contact with her parents because of their constant attempts to change her, turn her into someone she was not. The girl sighed, understanding that her parents had always dreamed of a son, so they never liked the true essence of their daughter. They criticized every trait of her personality, her laughter too loud and expressive, her way of communicating excessively verbose and fast, the friends she associated with, her academic successes, which, in their opinion, were not outstanding enough, and her behavior, which they considered provocative. Constant teasing and attempts to transform her led Hannah to decide to leave home as soon as possible, enter university, and move to another city. The field of study was chosen by her father, who insisted she become a lawyer. Hannah surrendered, understanding that fighting her parents was pointless. Upon arriving in another city, she freed herself from her parents' strict control and decided to be herself. Learning that she didn't want to return home, her parents tried to draw her back, but she refused. Hannah decided to live by her own rules and doesn't regret any of it. Connor was amazed by Hannah's stories. She was a whole year younger, yet had already experienced and seen so much in life. However, over time, Hannah's endless parties began to wear on Connor. At times, he simply wanted to be alone at home in front of the TV, but the girl constantly dragged him out to the bar, suggested jumping off the bridge into the river, or simply strolling through the night city. Her unrestrained adventurous spirit, which had previously charmed him, now became a significant drawback for Connor. Living without knowing what to expect from this extravagant girl used to excite and amaze him, but now only caused irritation. Hannah loved Connor, and he felt it. He anticipated that the breakup would be difficult, but he couldn't even imagine what would happen after that. Connor became more convinced that it was time to part ways with Hannah. She had been living in his apartment for almost a year, her things were everywhere. Connor couldn't imagine how her move would go. He had never shared a living space with someone on a permanent basis before and didn't know how to handle this situation. Hannah noticed that something had changed between them. She asked questions, trying to understand what was happening. Connor remained silent, occasionally sighing sadly, implying that she should figure out where everything was heading. But the explanation finally came in December. Connor returned from university exhausted and irritated due to the diploma he had to complete. Hannah's carefree smile and inappropriate suggestions only annoyed him. "Why worry about this diploma? People live without it," Hannah shrugged gracefully. Connor couldn't contain himself and unleashed all his long-standing dissatisfaction. He yelled at Hannah, calling her selfish, living off others without thinking about the future. But in her eyes, there was an indescribable pain and horror, and Connor felt he was wrong. "I'm sorry, I'll be the way you want me to be," she said quietly. Connor fell silent, taken aback. She had fought for so long for the right to be herself and behave as she wished. But Hannah's sudden offer to change herself to please Connor came too late. "Hannah, I'm sorry for my outburst," Connor said, collecting his thoughts. "We need to break up. I've wanted to say this for a long time, but I didn't dare. It's just, no." "No, no!" Hannah screamed, desperation in her voice. She refused to accept it. In a surge of emotion, she swept a vase off the table, and it shattered into thousands of shards. You can't push me away. We're adults. I love you more than anyone in this world. Don't you understand?" Connor looked at Hannah, who was hysterical, realizing she was truly unstable. If before he found it appealing, now it was repelling. "Go," Connor whispered, standing by the door. He tried to break free from her embrace and finally escort her out. Connor wasn't particularly worried. Hannah had plenty of acquaintances in the city who would gladly take her in. That same evening, Connor packed Hannah's things into 2 large bags. He knew it might seem cruel, but he no longer wanted to tolerate her unstable behavior. One of Hannah's friends picked up the belongings after reaching out to Connor. He asked if Hannah was crying, but the friend replied that she was constantly crying and didn't want anything. Connor nodded. He hoped Hannah would calm down soon and find new love, as had happened several times in her life. It was typical behavior for Hannah, but this time Hannah not only didn't calm down but also began to pursue Connor with her characteristic persistence. One day, Hannah appeared at the university dressed as if she had become a nun. Modest clothing, a grim look, a long skirt, beautiful hair tucked under a headscarf. "I'm changing for you," she said quietly. "Do you understand? I'm trying so hard. I'm different now, obedient, ready to submit. I'll do whatever you say." This not only frightened Connor but also filled him with horror. He spent a lot of energy trying to keep her at a distance. Notes about love and pleas for forgiveness started appearing on the walls of the hallway where Connor lived. Hannah bombarded him with electronic and paper letters, even composing poems. Wherever Connor went, he encountered her, be it the shopping mall, a cozy cafe bar, or just the park. Continuously, like an intrusive shadow, Hannah followed him, pleading for communication, sometimes even threatening. Inside, Connor felt perplexed. His beliefs and requests seemed to find no response. Hannah persisted in setting her behavior line. Once, when Connor returned home after a celebratory evening marking the defense of his diploma, Hannah attacked him. The night was already late, the streets empty. In a good mood after a successful day, he got out of the taxi, paid the driver, and headed towards his home. Hannah, like a ghost in black, imperceptibly blended into the darkness of the early morning landscape. "If you won't be with me, then you won't belong to anyone," she yelled, pouncing on Connor, who didn't immediately feel the need to defend himself. The girl possessed a strange, unusual strength, but she overlooked one fact: he was a man, having physical superior strength. Connor managed to push the attacker away, and Hannah awkwardly fell on the asphalt, hitting her back loudly. "What are you doing?" exclaimed Connor, bewildered. "I'm sorry," murmured Hannah, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't understand what's happening to me. I love you. How could I?" Connor hurried into the entrance, slamming the door loudly behind him. His heart was uneasy. Hannah had made a mistake today, but the next time she could do something even more dangerous. A new wave of fear suddenly gripped him. The day after the incident with Hannah, the girl's friend called Connor. She had to retrieve Hannah's personal belongings, and with a broken voice, she reported that Hannah had attempted to take her own life. She hadn't succeeded. The rope snapped. She was noticed in time. The ambulance arrived quickly, but now Hannah was in intensive care. Connor felt guilty about what happened to the girl. He was horrified by everything that had happened, but simultaneously felt afraid of Hannah. This feeling was unbearable. For Connor, the story ended relatively well. Hannah survived, but she was diagnosed with an illness caused by severe stress. At that time, Connor preferred not to dwell on what exactly had caused this stress. Hannah was referred to a closed clinic on the recommendation of mutual acquaintances. Connor learned that her parents now visited her. Apparently, they understood how much their daughter needed their support. Friends occasionally visited Hannah in the hospital, but Connor never met her again, sincerely wishing to forget this entire heavy story. But something kept bothering him. Perhaps it was then that he first began to contemplate his wrongful behavior towards women. He saw them merely as objects, beautiful and valuable, but still objects. How many tears had been shed by women because of his indifference? He never paid attention to the feelings of his girlfriends, many of whom sincerely loved him. Since the incident with Hannah, Connor began to exhibit significantly more caution in his relationships. He paid much more attention to the words and gestures of women, catching the slightest nuances, trying to be more sensitive and considerate. He always maintained a safe distance, preferring casual relationships, prearranged without unnecessary romance or unexpected surprises. However, memories of Hannah remained for him as an irreplaceable piece of life, etched forever in his memory. Upon finishing university, Connor was arranged by his father for a promising position at a local company with a very decent salary and promising prospects. He enthusiastically immersed himself in work affairs, diligently and wholeheartedly taking on the execution of his duties. If he was once just an unnoticed student becoming an employee, he amazed everyone with his dedication to work. He delved into all the intricacies of the business, constantly learning and striving to emulate experienced colleagues. As for his personal life, he didn't even contemplate any serious relationships. Girls from respectable families diligently tried to court him, but Connor remained steadfast. He did not desire marriage, let alone children. He continued to perceive life as a collection of pleasant moments without unnecessary commitments and problems. The story with Hannah continued to live on in his memory. They maintained superficial relations but understood each other from the very first meeting. Brief romances, ignited fleetingly for pleasure, found their place in his life. Several years passed. Connor had become an experienced professional. He earned respect within his company. His efforts were recognized. His career growth was the result of his own efforts, not solely due to his caring father's concern. The parents felt extreme pride regarding their son. It never crossed their minds that from the little Connor, who seemed to be just a typical son of a wealthy father, someone who wouldn't amount to much, something would happen. He was careless in his studies, frivolously spent money, and was not receptive to parental advice. But at some point it seemed like Connor suddenly became more mature and started acting sensibly. This pleased the parents, although for their complete happiness, there was only one thing missing for their son: to start a family, get married, and give them grandchildren. However, Connor was still too young, so the parents didn't insist too much.